What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, bringing you another edition of the Thomas Take. I'm very excited to start another edition of today's Buffalo Bills pre-draft show. Yes, in case you've been living under a rock, it is draft day. Round one starts tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and I am joined by Trainwrecksports.com writer Jake Watkins. What's going on, Jake? How you been?
Great, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm very pumped up for this show, very pumped up for the draft. Another draft year, another draft day. It's good to be alive.
Yeah, no, it really is. I know everybody says this, it seems, that I've been talking to, but it really is like Christmas because it's the beginning of a new league year. It's the beginning of the fantasy season, as I like to look at it.
Yeah.
And it's all uphill from here for the NFL until the season starts.
That's funny, too, because you mentioned that before we went live, we talked a little bit, and you mentioned that, you see this as the beginning of the fantasy season. How do you look at this draft from a fantasy perspective as far as players that you really like? I mean, I guess it does depend on where they go, obviously, but you can still kind of make a judgment call just based on the talent that some of these players have that they will be fantasy contributors. Who do you like as far as guys that could be contributors to your fantasy team that are rookies in this draft?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be as exciting from the quarterback perspective as it was last year.
Right.
I don't really know if we're going to have a lot of, elite-level rookie talent, at least, coming in. I think if Kyler Murray does end up going to Arizona, I think it could be a good fit. I'm just not completely sold on them trading Rosen and drafting Murray, because I've been thinking of it like this. They're basically choosing between having Josh Rosen and probably Nick Bosa, or they're going to have Kyler Murray and a second or third round pick. And personally, I'd rather have Josh Rosen and Nick Bosa. So, outside of that, I haven't really putting my finger on where Kyler Murray could go in the draft if Arizona doesn't. For some reason, I have a feeling that Oakland could take him, and that could be the weird, shock factor pick, whatever, Gruden has been telling reporters that they're going to be making. That could be interesting, but I definitely think Kyler Murray's best fit from a fantasy and just overall production standpoint would be with Arizona, because he'd have, a top 10 probable running back in David Johnson. He'd have, Christian Kirk. He was a valuable rookie last year. Larry Fitzgerald would be good to have, help coach him along a little bit. And then that'd kind of really be it for quarterbacks. But running backs, I'm interested to see how Miles Sanders translates to the NFL, because, Penn State, I've been following them for most of my life. I'm a big Penn State fan. And there wasn't a huge drop-off in the production at the running back position from them when Saquon got drafted last year and Miles Sanders had to step in. So I think he is kind of being overlooked this year.
I would agree, for sure.
A lot of people have him from their 6 to 9 running back, and he's definitely in my top 5. So
I had him at 5. I had him 5th in my top 5, and no one really disagreed with me on that, because the numbers don't lie. I mean, the numbers, as you alluded to, Saquon Barkley had, great numbers. He did some decent things, more than decent things, I should say, with Penn State. But Miles Sanders last season, there really was not much of a drop-off. You wondered, who is this guy, and why didn't we hear about him before? We didn't hear about him before because Saquon Barkley was getting the lion's share of the carries. So it's funny how that stuff works out. I don't want to give it this comparison quite yet, because these two guys were ultimately Hall of Famers, but it's like Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders in a way, where you have one really, really elite running back in college, and he leaves and gets drafted, and then he leaves it for the guy underneath him to kind of take the rock and do what he needs to do, and that's kind of what Miles Sanders has done. So I find that interesting. Miles Sanders is a guy that is kind of flown under the radar in this draft, and I think on the right team and the right scheme, he could be really good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then one running back I kind of have as a sleeper, Devin Singletary. I honestly really, really have a lot of hopes for him as a pass catching running back when he comes to the NFL. and it doesn't really show in his college numbers because he only had a bare minimum amount of catches, but they also didn't really target him out of the backfield very much. And what he did with those catches is what's most impressive to me. And he's very elusive. He has good feet. He's small. He's like 5'9", just barely over 200 pounds. So I feel like like he could be a future like TJ Yeldon or someone of that nature.
Right. And don't they call him Motor because he's just constantly going and he's like 5'9" and just bouncing off of people, kind of like a Travis Henry type that Bills fans would definitely know. That's kind of how I would compare him. Mm-hmm. Right out of Florida Atlantic, and I'm looking at his career highlights. Most valuable player in the Central USA Conference, first team All-CUSA in 2017 and 2018. And went to American Heritage High School in Florida, which my cousin actually went to that high school. So that's pretty interesting. And as a sophomore in 2017, he led all Division I players with 32 rushing touchdowns, 33 overall scored, and 198 points scored. Finished with 1,920 rushing yards. That's pretty good, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no.
That's not bad.
Yeah, no. And it's mainly because of his burst in the open field that he's able to break off a lot of big runs. Like his run after big contact, I don't have the number on me right now, but I remember when I saw it. It was a pretty good number.
Right. And there's a lot of prospects that they always talk about, tonight is the first round, but tomorrow is the second and third round, and then 4 or 5, I think that's how they do it now, where the second and third round are tomorrow. And there's always guys that get overlooked just because the media kind of looks at these first-round guys so much. And those are classic cases. You mentioned that from a fantasy perspective, the quarterback draft class is not really that great. Who's a guy outside of Kyler Murray, though, that you think could be okay fantasy-wise, depending on where he goes?
See, it is really tough because in my eyes, it is a significant drop-off. I would probably have to say Dwayne Haskins just because he's probably one of the more consistent quarterbacks that are coming out. He had, I think, like 70% pass completion in 2018, and of course, like that doesn't always translate to the NFL level. But when you're looking at rookies with a small sample size, you're trying to find as many good signs that can say what they're going to be able to do. He isn't the most not that he isn't accurate because he obviously had that very good completion percentage, but sometimes he just has trouble, from what I've seen, like fitting the ball like with the right amount of zip on it or not, which is kind of similar to Josh Allen, but he doesn't have the same physical attributes really, so he'll have to hone in on that a little bit. But if he can, I think that he could do some things. Maybe not this season necessarily, because a lot of people have him going to the Giants potentially. Even though somehow he's zooming up everybody's draft boards today. That seems to be what's going on Twitter.
Right.
But if he were to go to Washington at 15, or if they were to trade up for him, I don't know how well he would do fantasy-wise, but that might be one of the only other opportunities he'd have, or any quarterback would have, to really start this year.
I see Haskins in my top 5 at 4, and it's very odd because I think what I see in Dwayne Haskins is a lot different than what other people see, and it's not that he's bad, it's not that he's horrible, it's not any of those things. It's just that there isn't really a wow factor. There's not a this guy did like with Josh Allen, with Sam Darnold, even with Josh Rosen, and even Lamar Jackson last year, and obviously Mayfield. They all have those wow plays where they made really big plays that were really nice. Whereas Dwayne Haskins, I think, actually to his detriment, it's almost like he's so polished that he's kind of, I don't want to say bland, but he's just not. There's not one attribute that I look at and say, man, I really got to go and get that guy. I just don't see it, and I see it with guys like Ryan Finley of NC State, and he's rated a lot lower on draft boards, and you look at his career numbers, and I mean, he threw for a lot of yards, threw for a lot of touchdowns, started a lot of games, as did Haskins. Yeah. So it's very tough to kind of rank a top 5 when you have guys that are very similar in terms of what they brought to the college level.
Yeah, no, I agree. And since we're on the subject of quarterbacks right now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Tyree Jackson out of UB. Of course, we all know, he's projected to be somewhere between like a late second to anywhere from like a 4th to a 5th round pick. And I wrote a lot about him. I watched every single UB game, this past year. And I had a horns up, horns down column. And basically the good performers got a horns up and the bad ones got a horns down. And he found himself on the horns down side of it more times than not. And it's not to say that he wasn't playing well. It's just that he was extremely inconsistent and was never living up completely to, the talent that he clearly had. Some of those highlight reel throws that he had, you look at him and watch him make them, and you would say that looks like Patrick Mahomes out there. That looks like, some of the good plays Josh Allen had, or like a young Ben Roethlisberger. But then he also has these plays where he just doesn't know what to do. Right. And that kind of comes from the coaching style that Lance Leipold had at UB, where they're basically coaching them through every single play almost while it's happening. Like they couldn't run a hurry-up offense, really, because they would rush up to the line, and then they would stop, and then they would look at the sideline and get every single signal they needed. And then on top of that, his footwork, kind of like Josh Allen, actually, could use a little bit of work, but it's not really footwork while he's in the pocket. It's his footwork when he's moving outside of it, because he is able to make those dynamic throws on the run that not many people can, but he also doesn't – he thinks that his ability is a little stronger than it is, and he doesn't always get his feet set to throw. Even though as difficult as that it is to do on the run, you still have to at least make sure you're square to where you're throwing. And, but he's a hard worker. He's a genuine blue-collar guy. And if he gets behind the right quarterback, like Phillip Rivers, like some people have been talking about, I think he could develop into, at the very least, like a quality backup in the league.
Oh, for sure. And I see that mainly due to the fact that he does have the physical attributes. And sometimes with a guy like Tyree Jackson, the guy like him, you have a guy that is so athletic and just so big and strong that they almost overcompensate what is just the basic, simplistic rule of just playing quarterback or throwing a football, really, like setting your feet, putting your shoulder into the target, towards the target. Those are like basics that you learn as like, a peewee level. And you see those things that it's not that he can't do that. I just think that he is such a rare athlete. 6'7", 6'8", maybe?
I believe he came in at 6'7" at the combine.
6'7" at the combine. So I always say they're an inch shorter than what they say at the combine, just for jokes.
No, I couldn't agree more.
So we'll just say 6'6" and a half, just for the heck of it. But there were moments, you perfectly described it. There were moments with Tyree Jackson where he looked as if he just simply did not know what to do. He would look at the first guy, and the first guy would be open. He'd throw it either inaccurately or force the ball, and it would be maybe an incomplete pass or at worst a turnover. Or there were those plays where he made those really big plays. What I saw is a quarterback that was often bailed out by his receiver. And that guy, you know who I'm talking about, Anthony Johnson, that guy is phenomenal. I would love to see him go to Buffalo, given that I think they do still need another receiver in this draft. And as far as like UB products, Khalil Hodge, Anthony Johnson, Tyree Jackson, all three of them are really good. I think all three of them will get drafted in the second to fourth round, maybe even fifth, depending on what happens. But I really like Tyree Jackson. I think I agree with you on multiple fronts that given the right fit, if he were to go to like San Diego or I think the best fit for him would be like Kansas City with the Chiefs, with Pat Mahomes, with Andy Reid. You could really see him develop into something special.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And since you mentioned Khalil Hodge, and obviously we can talk about Anthony Johnson too,
Yeah.
but he was such a great leader on that UB Bulls team, and I'm honestly shocked that he isn't getting a little bit more love in the draft hype, because I think, like, if you watch him play, he is such a sideline-to-sideline quick linebacker that is always in on the play. He's really good at picking up running backs coming out of the backfield. He's good in coverage, whether it's zone or man. There were a lot of games that he himself decided the outcome based on a single, whether it's a forced fumble or a pass deflection in, like, in the fourth quarter. And, a lot of teams, I think, should really be looking at him in the later rounds. Like, if the Bills were to draft him in the 6th or the 7th, because, some people even have him as an undrafted free agent.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
That's crazy.
It's kind of obnoxious. And he's,
right.
Like, his numbers during the regular season were ridiculous. And, I really hope that he ends up on a good team. And it kills me to say, but no matter where he goes, and I mean no matter what team in the NFL he goes to, I think he will succeed, and I hope he does succeed. And I think he can be a good linebacker for many years to come.
I would love to see him get a shot in like the 4th or 5th round, because that's where I think he should be picked. I mean, there's some players that have been picked in the 4th and 5th round of the past few years' drafts that they didn't even make the first roster cut. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, they didn't even make it to the 75-man roster, let alone the 55-man roster, and they never played in the NFL again. Most of them ended up in the Alliance of American Football for 8-9 weeks. So, yeah, I mean, I really look at it, too. I look at it from a lot of different fronts as far as UB players that might not be getting the due that they deserve. I feel like that MAC conference is still looked down upon for whatever reason. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been a very long time since they've had a team ranked consistently like the Bulls were this past year. Mm-hmm. And it seems like the pool for college football talent just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper every year. And obviously the SEC is so heavily loaded. The Pac-12, two of those guys could make a living in the NFL.
Who's the lineman? Is it O'Hearn? Am I saying that right?
I think O'Hare.
O'Hare, yeah, that guy's really good. He's an animal.
He has a great personality too.
Yeah,
like, he's just a really good locker room guy. He's great on the field, on the sideline. I've never, in interviews I've seen and everything, I've never heard anything bad said about the guy, whether it's personality or skill. So
right. Yeah, and I definitely think that those 3 players are probably the 3 best players to come out of UB since Khalil Mack. And right there, we talked about, players that have come out of the Mack, and really the only one that UB had that was, obviously the best one that they might ever have, to be honest. I'm not saying that UB won't produce great players. It's just that Khalil Mack is Khalil Mack. Yeah, the best defensive player in the league. Yeah. So it's tough, but we just mentioned how Khalil Mack was one of those guys. Now they have 3 guys that at both sides of the ball that are pretty good, that will get drafted. I do think that is really obnoxious that Khalil Hodge is mentioned as an undrafted and I have seen that from national, like Fox Sports or whoever. It's like, really? You look at the numbers, you know that UB was on top of the MAC conference the whole year. That should get some attention, right?
Mm-hmm. But he's already a really motivated individual. They had, and I'm mad because I can't remember the name of the player, but the past Bull who passed away, and they passed on his number once a game to commemorate his memory. And so one player every week would wear number 41, and when he wore that number, it was his best game of the season by far, and he won them the game. And it's not like that was uncommon with whoever ended up wearing that number, but he's a very motivated individual with a great head on his shoulders, and the fact that he's being overlooked, he's just going to use that as more motivation, and I don't have a doubt in my mind that, even if he is a consistent backup, he's going to find a home in the NFL, and, he'll be in there for, at least a second contract.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I would definitely like that. And now, as far as the big Buffalo team, the NFL Buffalo team, the Bills, they picked 9th overall in this year's draft, and there's a lot of chatter, obviously, about what they could do, and we've seen these last 2 years specifically. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have kind of brought this new, I want to say, common sense approach to the Buffalo Bills that hasn't been seen in quite a long time. And I love. There's two things I love. I love the Buffalo Bills. The second thing I love more is just publicly shaming the last regime and the last regime before that, because they, in hindsight, you really look at it these last 2 years with what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have done, and those regimes were just so bad. Right?
Yeah, no, I remember my and this is sad that Fisk is my most vivid draft memory. But when we drafted EJ Manuel, I was watching it. I remember it was my senior year of high school, if I remember correctly, maybe my junior. And we were watching it in the cafeteria. We got a bunch of people together and we watched it. And my friend John, who I'm actually watching the draft with tonight.
Oh, that's awesome.
He said he had his phone turned off because he didn't want the tweet to, whatever, go off and him already know. And when they announced EJ Manuel with the 16th overall pick, he literally almost flipped his table, walked out of the cafeteria, went into his car and texted me, "You want to ride home, right?" So, yeah. So I haven't had an experience like that ever since. So we're definitely, if I'm going to use that as my standard, we're on a good path.
we're on a very good path. I could use this as my standard too, as far as EJ Manuel, and God bless him. Seemed like a great guy, Seemed like an awesome family dude. Yeah, really cool guy, and really did work hard to try to be the guy for Buffalo. It just didn't work out, and realistically, it was never going to. He was never going to live up to that first round billing because he should have been picked there. He had
a third round grade on him,
right?
And, everybody was shocked,
right? And I remember that watching it at my old house, the last house that I lived in before I moved into my house now, and I was watching it with a good buddy of mine, Zach, who I might be watching the draft with tonight. I invited him over, but we'll see what happens. But he's a Carolina Panthers fan, and we're waiting for the Bills to pick. They were supposed to pick 8th in that draft. Mm-hmm. They moved back to 16th overall. They trade back with the Rams. The Rams took Tavon Austin 8th overall. Yeah. That in itself was, in hindsight, awful, and that was a sign of things to come. So then 16th overall, Buffalo takes EJ Manuel. I shut off my TV and left my house. That was it. I could not watch it anymore. I just couldn't. We went to one of the gas stations and got snacks and just had Arizona iced tea and Doritos in his car and just listened to the draft on the radio. And I just went on and on about how bad of a pick that was, just because it just made no sense. And now with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, you've seen them kind of lay a foundation without even really trying in this common sense approach and the way they explain things in the press conferences, and I just think they're both great. I'm very happy that they're here.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a breath of fresh air. It took me a bit of getting used to adjust to their delicate dancing around what they want to say or what they can't say.
Right,
but, that's the business of the NFL. That's how everybody talks, and everybody just has their own, dialect in the way they do it. So, other than that initial, really minimal criticism, I am extremely happy with them, and I'm extremely excited about what they can do this year.
Brandon Beane's the type of guy that they ask him these questions, and he looks at things from a business perspective. He seems like he's a guy that you could see, out on, Wall Street or something like that, where he's just kind of hard-nosed, but he kind of keeps his head up.
He has, the aviators on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And Sean McDermott is the complete opposite. Sean McDermott's the type of coach that I could see myself, maybe he's not this hard-nosed, but I could see myself throwing up on the sideline at one of his practices and him saying, "Get back out there. you know. So Buffalo hasn't had that in quite a while. And I remember the training camp I went to, which was McDermott's first training camp, comparing it to Rex Ryan's training camp. I'm just like, wow, this is completely different. Like, they were organized, the drills were like fast, they were in unison, they were all really fired up to play for this guy from the get-go. So they've done some good things, but out of the draft picks that they've had, the Trey Whites, the Deion Dawkins, the Matt Milanos, the Josh Allen's, the Trey Edmonds, who's a guy that you really like, and I might already know who it is because everybody likes him, but who's a guy that you really like already, just in terms of what he brings to the table?
Like that the regime has already brought in, that they've already drafted?
That they've already drafted, yeah. Or even signed, or even free agency.
I would say, it's just so hard. I'm going to keep it to drafting, because if I open it up to free agency, it's too hard.
Yeah.
But honestly, I would have to say Matt Milano, because it's just, Tremaine Edmonds, you know what you're getting. You know how intelligent he is. You know how mature he is for such a young guy. Josh Allen, he basically lived up to what we thought he would be. Maybe exceeding expectations a little bit. But he's the same athlete that we thought we were going to get. And Trey White, the character stories that came out of LSU. I just knew he was going to. After we got the pick, I hadn't heard of him too much. And then I looked him up, and I read like 10 articles in a row, and I was like, this guy's going to be good.
Yeah.
But with Matt Milano, you weren't really able to do that, because he was a third or a fourth round selection.
I think he actually was a fifth. I could actually look at. Yeah, I think he was a fifth, which that's a steal. Yeah, round 5,
exactly.
Pick 163. Yeah.
And there's just it's really wonderful to see that I trust them evaluating talent, which is something I haven't been able to say about really, and maybe not a lot of people can say about their GMs consistently, because, they're able to even get, like someone like Levi Wallace or, Teron Johnson, they were able to get them and, get them to be, quality contributors on the field, even though they came in the later rounds. Mm-hmm. So, that's why I never really love having too many draft picks, but with this GM and coach, combination,
right,
I love it, because I know that they're probably going to hit on most of them.
Well, it's kind of like the old thought of, if you have a GM and a coach that are on the same page, it leads to success. In every which team that has had, somewhat of a dynasty, that has, a window where they were very, very good. They had a GM who was really good, owner that was really good, and a coach. I'd say owner, GM, and coach, that the goal has to be, in unison. And I think it is with Terry, Brandon Beane, and Sean McDermott. I don't know about Terry, Jason Bottrill, and the coach with no face. We'll get to that later for sure.
Yeah, but I'm excited for that.
Yeah. But, I really feel like right now they pick 9th overall, and we can only go off of what we know. They pick 9th overall. Who is a guy that you want them to take? Who are maybe, rattle off 3 or 4 names that you might like in the first round for the Bills in this year's draft?
So obviously I'm on the side of TJ Hawkinson, but I was looking at the list of the players that the Bills had in for visits, and they did not have TJ Hawkinson or Noah Fant in on one of the pre-draft visits out of their 30 possible. So I find it very unlikely that they might draft someone they didn't have in for a visit that early in the draft.
Me too.
Maybe if anything, they might trade up into the first round for someone like that, like in the later part of it, in the 20s to the 30s to the end of it. But at the same time, maybe they don't want to give up that kind of draft capital. I'm not big on DK Metcalf at 9. That's more someone I would want to trade back and get personally.
Right.
But I understand the appeal. But for me, it was just more of like one of those flavor of the week prospects who everybody wanted for a week.
He ran a fast 40 time, and that was really it.
Like 4.33.
Right.
He's a big guy, so that's great.
Right.
But I'm definitely siding between Brian Burns from FSU and Ed Oliver.
Oh, wow.
Brian Burns, obviously both of them we would need a little bit of help to have them fall to us, and that probably means, having a quarterback or two going in, the top 8 picks.
Right.
And Detroit has been rumored to be, a big trade candidate. So let's say, the Redskins feel like they want to trade up there. That's probably, a quarterback going off the board, or if anyone trades up there.
Or if Miami or Cincinnati.
Take your pick.
Right.
If I were Miami, I wouldn't draft a quarterback this year personally.
Right, I wouldn't
we
either.
Can talk about that. Yeah.
I hope they do. That'd be nice.
Oh, yeah. That'd be nice for us.
Right. As long as they don't get Tua next year or Trevor Lawrence from Clemson in a couple years, that'd be horrible for us. But yeah.
Yeah. But, Ed Oliver and Brian Burns, they both kind of said some things that, as a Bills Mafia member, just got me hyped up.
Yeah, I agree.
Brian Burns said that someone asked him, who's the first player you want to stack in the NFL? And he said without hesitation, Tom Brady. And that it gave me butterflies.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff that he has. Brian Burns, when you watch him, he's smart. He's very smart. Very smart player. And he might not have the physical, off-the-chart measurables, but I just want a guy that you can plug in and play that knows the game.
Exactly.
And that's it. That's the best pick you can get.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And if he or Ed Oliver managed to fall to 9, because they're both, respectively, Ed Oliver, the third best-rated prospect as, like, the, expert consensus goes, and Brian Burns is the 4th. So the fact that they've been falling to 9 and later in some mock drafts is kind of astounding to me.
Right.
But, the one thing Ed Oliver said that got me going was he, after seeing the Bills' weight room, he was like, I got to go watch a bunch of Kyle Williams tape. And
yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, so, it's just, as far as, if we're going to stick with the theme of building the culture, we don't have to make the case for them as physical specimens and elite athletes. So, that's why they're at the top of the draft and they're very, sought after. But it just seems like those two are the two players that would really fit in the most here.
Right, I would agree, and they would actually fill 2 needs. I mean, Jerry Hughes, I love him with much respect, but he's not getting any. He's not getting any younger. He's on the wrong side of 30, and there's a huge question mark hanging over whether the Bills option Shaq Lawson. They have, some time to decide on that. So that's why the defensive end position, I think, is such a need, just based on those 2 things. And then obviously, I mean, there is no quote unquote replacing Kyle Williams, but you have to replace him. He's not on the team anymore. So it's a tough decision. I'd love either player. I would be all for either player, whether it's Oliver or Burns. I'd have both of them on my. I don't know if you saw it, but I tweeted a Bills top 5 big board, and Burns was on it. Oliver was on it. So yeah, I'm right there with you. That'd be awesome. I'd be down for it.
Yeah. And just the one thing I'm really not hoping for is an offensive lineman, just because if it seems like Juwan Taylor might be the way that they want to go, and Ty Nsekhe just got a sizable contract, which means they want him to start on the offensive line at right tackle, and that's what Juwan Taylor does, and he doesn't have the ability to flip to the left side. So then, would you move an already established pro to a position, or would you move a rookie? I'm just not all for that.
Yeah, and my thought on Juwan Taylor is that if Florida thought that he was a left tackle, why wasn't he playing left tackle?
Exactly.
And that's kind of what gets me kind of a little, I don't know, perplexed that he was a right tackle. Do they like Deion Dawkins at left tackle? Everything tells me, yeah, but then again, this talk of them bringing in a tackle and them actually bringing in tackles in free agency kind of tell me no, that they might put Deion Dawkins at right tackle and Ty Nsekhe at left, or draft a Jonah Williams at left, and then move Deion Dawkins to right. There's a lot of different options, but I think first round, if I'm picking in the top 10, I'm taking somebody that I can plug and play that's going to be a defensive, quote-unquote, playmaker or an offensive, quote-unquote, playmaker. And that could be a pass rusher or a receiver or a tight end. That's what I want. I want a D-tackle, wide receiver, or I'd say D-tackle, tight end, defensive end, or trade down and get a wide receiver. There's too many wide receivers in this draft class to take one 9th overall, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. The second round and even the third round seems like the sweet spot for that, whether it's someone like N'Keal Harry or A.J. Brown, who I really think should be going earlier, A.J. Brown.
I think A.J. Brown might be better than Metcalf.
I completely agree, because Metcalf has the injury concerns.
Right.
And even if you expand the stats that he had over the few games he was able to play, it wouldn't have equaled A.J. Brown's season totals. And A.J. Brown outperformed him in those games as well. So it's not like A.J. Brown excelled because Metcalf wasn't there.
Right, and there was a receiver that was drafted out of Ole Miss by the name of Laquan Treadwell, and he was a massive bust. I mean, massive. And there's a lot of the same skills that DK Metcalf has that Treadwell has. I'm not saying Metcalf is Treadwell, but that does need to be thrown out there too. You got to look at all positives and negatives of a situation before you take somebody that high. 9th overall. Buffalo, I think, is in a real unique spot because I don't think they're that bad to be picking 9th overall. You know what I mean? I don't think they have that. I don't think they have that many true needs to be picking 9th overall anymore.
Like, if you judge it based off of last year's team, absolutely. But based off of what they've done in free agency, they have, and this has been, repeated so often, but you can't overstate it enough. Brandon Beane has brought in so many great quality veteran players that they don't have one set need. And there is the whole debate about best player available or, drafting for need. And it really is always a combination of both. But now they can actually, say, okay, well, we have two great safeties, but we have this safety. I know they were looking at Juan Thornhill out of Virginia. If he's their top-rated player in the second round, they can take him because that's what they're able to do because of the depth they have. Would I do that? Not personally, because there are other quality players there. But I wouldn't be mad about it.
Right. I trust the process, and I trust that they'll do what's right. I really do, and I have a lot of very I'm just very full of optimism for the Buffalo Bills. And it's funny, you look across the way, from Orchard Park to downtown Buffalo, Seymour Knox Plaza. I'm not so optimistic. We'll talk about that. We're going to go to a quick little break here, and I'm going to be right back here with Jake Watkins. We're going to be talking about the Buffalo Sabres, and he's going to let me know what he thinks about the past Sabres season and who they might bring in as their next head coach.